Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and everyone out there, I hope that you're having a wonderful day, and hey, you're ready for some Computer America. So today on the program, in the second part of the show, we will be doing computer and technology news, and of course, that's where we try to catch you up on everything that's happening. It's a very fast-paced world out there, and even us, we try to surround ourselves in technology, and we can barely keep up. So everyone, that's in the second part of the show. In the first part of the show, though, we have a guest, and today's guest is none other than Quantellia. If you haven't heard of them, well, this is the perfect place for you because, hey, we're going to learn all about them from, of course, the company's chief scientist. I knew it. So with that being said, everyone, before we get started, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including the show notes, link to our guest website, and any articles, videos, products, reviews, anything like that. All of it will be available at Computer America. While you're there, also check out the live video portion, check out recent articles, and find us on social media at Computer America. Now, with all that being said, the morning announcements are done. Why don't we go ahead and jump right into today's program? So, as I said before, Quantellia to tell us all about artificial intelligence and what it is that they do in particular. I think this is the perfect person to really break it down and explain it for us is Dr. Lorien Pratt, and she'll be joining us here in just a moment. She is the chief scientist for Quantellia. So let's go ahead and bring her on, and everyone, let's go ahead and get this started. So Dr. Pratt, thank you so much for joining us here on Computer America.
Thank you, Ben. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. And so, this looks like a very in-depth kind of topic, but at the same time, I think it's one that people will be affected whether they know it or not, and are currently being affected whether they know it or not. So before we get into what it is that Quantellia does, give us a little bit of background on the company, when was it started, and a bit of your background. Have you always been in artificial intelligence and high tech?
Sure. Yeah. So I have 3 computer science degrees, bachelor's, master's, and PhD. And the master's and PhD were both in AI. So yeah, I've been coding since I was a baby. I was 14 years old in Madison, Wisconsin. So I'm absolutely always been in high tech. Yes.
It's I'm still working on my first, so I'll get there eventually. But
You'll get there.
It's and of course I'm sure, and the former host of Computer America, Craig Crossman, he had his bachelor's of computer science, but at the same time, he would talk about what he learned, and unfortunately, punch cards and kind of what he learned in the late 80s, being a computer scientist just isn't all that applicable. I'm hoping that your degrees and of course continuing education, how quickly do you think tech is moving nowadays?
I think it's moving super fast. And the most recent developments are data, where we have petabytes, terabytes, exabytes of data, and our ability to process and analyze and use that data is going, well beyond tech. When I was a computer scientist, my mom couldn't spell software and didn't know the difference between the two. And now she has a computer on her desk that's more powerful than most crays back in the day, right? So,
Hmm.
and one in her pocket that's more powerful than the Apollo systems that got us to the moon. And so we're not only seeing a lot of growth, but definitely an acceleration driven by data and then AI layers on top of it.
And I can definitely see how that, that kind of key point there is really why you're here, and with Quantellia, which, according to the tagline, applied machine learning and decision intelligence. We've talked about machine learning and artificial intelligence here on the program many a time. I think that the audience, if they're not well versed in it, and I'm not talking about the nuances, but just the general idea of it, they've at least heard of it. So I think that's where we should start. And of course, applied machine learning. If you could tell us, kind of what that is compared to artificial intelligence, and then the other part, decision intelligence. What is that?
Sure. So we'll start with machine learning. And I guess I want to make an overall point that machine learning's been in academics, machine learning and AI have been primarily academic fields for about half a century now. And what that means is that when you talk to somebody about these fields, it can get pretty gnarly. People can get very technical. But just like you can drive a Ferrari without knowing what's under the hood, one of the most exciting developments in these fields is we can use them and to our advantage, not just, to have people advertise us without knowing what's under the hood of AI. And so that distinction between the inside of the box and the outside of the box is really important. So the outside of the box is pretty simple. It's computers that program themselves using data. So in the old days, if I wanted to write a computer program that could maybe tell the difference between an apple and a pear, I'd have to write a lot of code that says, well, an apple, we need to look for some redness and a particular shape. These days, it turns out we can get much better performance and save ourselves a lot of work by just having a big database of pictures and apples, pictures and pears, and each apple we have a label on it that says apple, and each pear
It's
we have a label
yeah,
that says pear.
and sorry to step on you here, but it reminds me, and you might have heard of the webcomic XKCD, but they have
Yeah.
a very succinct way to put this, where I'm just going to read the thing, saying that they have a boss and a programmer, and the boss says, when a user takes a photo, the app should check whether they're in a national park, and they say, sure, sure, easy, that'll take me a few hours, and check whether the photo is of a bird, and then they say, I'll need a research team in 5 years. Something that should be simple is very complex.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And so what we can do with machine learning is you can actually do that bird versus not bird much faster. So if you've got those examples, instead of writing code in your favorite language like Java or C or whatever it is, we have this great big database of bird pictures, feed that into the machine learning system, and the machine learning system then produces something called a model, which is just a piece of software that now takes new pictures and says, okay, I'm 80% sure that's a bird, and I'm 90% sure it's within a national park. So that's all it is, guys. I mean, we can make this really overcomplicated. It's just a magic piece of software. We can talk about the inside of the box if you want, but it just takes this list of examples and produces a model that does this classification. And that is 90% of machine learning today. Now, there's certainly other things, but most of the power we're getting is just that very simple way of thinking about it.
And that's something that I wanted to touch on just a little bit, which is you mentioned that this was a pursuit in academia for the past 50 years or so, and so it's been used there. But I would say that probably over the past 6 years or so, artificial intelligence and machine learning, they're used almost interchangeably in terms of marketing speak, but they've really been, and definitely over the past 3 or 4 years, this has become like the new buzzword, and I'm assuming that corporations and businesses all over the world are starting to really utilize, machine learning. Why do you think that is? Is it just is it just marketing, or is there actual applications that are just starting to emerge? Emerge.
Yeah, there's definitely substance here. There is also a lot of frothy fluff as we talk about artificial general intelligence and, computers that will take over the world. That is by and large clickbait. When we started having a cotton gin, we didn't have science fiction movies about cotton gins taking over the world. So AI tends to get, because of Hollywood, it can be confusing for somebody trying to learn about this. So there is definitely substance, and there's good reasons for that substance that I can talk about. But there's also a lot of, we need to read skeptically. We need to realize that people will send you articles about AI taking over the world because they have an ad in that they want to expose you to, and it's a pretty sexy topic. So we need to read carefully and critically to separate the two.
And that's something that's that's another topic that we've covered, which is negativity and sensationalism really do kind of fuel these advertising industries. So we are definitely on that vein. But I was also speaking to the fact that it seems like every company is using machine learning in some capacity, and like for some it makes perfect sense when it comes to airlines or package shipping and things that are like logistics, and that makes perfect sense. Yeah. But then there are other companies that, maybe the bakery down the road says that they have machine learning, cupcakes. Like there's good applications, and I feel like there's applications that just make no sense. But, kind of like the Bitcoin and the blockchain craze of 3 or 4 years ago, there was a company that changed their name to, added blockchain to their name, and their stock went up 500%. But you're saying that there's actual quantifiable, like good applications of this technology. It's not all hype.
Absolutely. So when Netflix recommends a movie, that's machine learning. When Google sends you an ad, and when many advertising companies choose which ad to show to you, that's machine learning. When Pandora recommends a song, that's machine learning. So there are, I work with SAP, they have hundreds of machine learning applications, from machine vision to financial analysis to analyzing invoices. There are very substantive machine learning systems out there, and you can imagine they would, because now we have computers that not only can program themselves from examples, but if we get new examples and the world changes, they can automatically change that program without having a human modify the software. So that's incredibly powerful in certain domains. And there's a whole new class of problems. We'll talk about decision intelligence in a moment. Mm-hmm. That as that starts to hit its stride, sitting on top of AI, that will be able to be solved.
Yeah, we will touch on.
It's real. Yeah. It's real.
Yeah, perfect. And we are going to touch on decision intelligence in just a second, but I also wanted to talk about, the inside of the box, but nothing technical. I wanted to, talk about this idea that you mentioned that you input a bunch of data, you give the guidelines, you're saying this is your job, here's data, and train yourself to do this job as best you can. Right. And what happens on the inside is largely kind of self-governed, and that's why I think corporations are very protective of their intellectual property, because these things that, let's say it's IBM who collects a bunch of, tons and tons of pictures of glaucoma or something, and they train an AI to spot glaucoma. They're very protective because that secret sauce is eventually going to be their, the product that they sell. Right. And let's talk about something like, let's say, self-driving cars. We have seen instances where self-driving cars, unfortunately, don't recognize, let's say, pedestrians because they aren't at the crosswalk. The car doesn't expect it, and very, very unfortunate things happen. My question to you is that when it comes to any kind of, and I know that legislation and regulation are always many years behind technology, but when it comes to kind of self-driving cars, and that's one of them because it has a very obvious impact. These companies are very they don't communicate with one another. There's no set standard for what these self-driving cars need to look for or how they operate. Do you think that going forward in certain industries, I'm not saying every industry, but certain industries, kind of loosening the restrictions, letting other companies kind of borrow from or adapt the data sets, do you think that's important going forward, or is it every man for himself right now like it is?
Well, what's interesting about AI is most of the most powerful algorithms have been published in open source. And I think that's a consequence of the history of AI having been in academics. And so the culture is everybody's sharing everything. And so most of the core algos are open source. On top of that, as you correctly point out, with like a glaucoma database, the specific models. So my big set of pictures of glaucoma and not glaucoma, and then the model I build with my machine learning. You're right. That's important intellectual property, and so that will be kept proprietary. I think those models are so valuable and they're so expensive to create because you've got to collect and create the data and
Mm-hmm.
curate it and cleanse it. So I think it's fair that the specific models are there generating royalty and license value for the companies that create them. I think that does make sense. Regarding self-driving cars, Ben, I agree with you. When we start to look at the outside of the box, there are ripple effects that don't have anything to do with technology. They have to do with regulation and legislation and ethics and trust.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that we've been very focused on the tech, and the next big bottleneck to solve in many cases are these outside of the box ripple effects on society. Any new technology has both positive and negative impacts. And I think, and again, decision intelligence, which we'll get to, helps with that. It helps you to understand those kind of causal chains that you set in motion so that you can be conscious about the potential unintended consequences of a new technology, the negative social consequences, and then, hopefully get ahead of those instead of, as you correctly say, that the tech is way ahead of the legislation and regulation and thinking. DI, that's one of the gaps that this DI tech, which we'll talk about, helps to solve, is understanding those ripple impacts on a
I've
wider world.
Yeah, and I think we've mentioned it a couple times, and this again is a new term to me as well. Decision intelligence. Let's get an outline for how this fits into everything we've been talking about.
Sure. Well, I think the first thing to say about DI is it's a new technology, and it's been in development, I would say, for about 10 years. I've been evangelizing it very hard. Delighted to say Gartner's recognized it as an emerging technology on their hype cycle, was written about in Forbes just a few months ago. Google's now trained 20,000 people in DI. So it's really exciting to have the chance to push forward a new technology. And there's dozens of vendors now selling it. And what it is just anything that has to do with using computers or other sciences and academics to understand how actions you take lead to outcomes. So if I'm going to make a decision to dig a hole to prevent a gas line from exploding, I could dig here or dig there with this kind of device or that kind of device. And the outcome obviously is twofold. One is the cost of all that digging, and the other is the likelihood of someone getting injured. So there's an example of a decision that leads to an action that leads to an outcome. On the commercial side, we might have a decision to charge a price for a product or to launch a product in a particular country, and those might lead to net profits. So anytime you're thinking through some action you might take that you hope leads to a larger good outcome than the negative side of the outcome, that's decision intelligence. So it's a very interdisciplinary field. It
Yeah.
includes economics and behavioral economics and social sciences. As a technologist, I tend to come at it from an AI point of view, and I say, well, how does AI, that that classification of that apple versus the pear, right? How does that fit into actions versus outcomes? Because, okay, it's great to have a classification. This is either an apple or pear, but that's useless unless it fits into some decision, right? How is that going to guide, some decision like on a fruit sorting thing? Maybe it's an apple versus a rotten apple for an agricultural provider. That's maybe a better example. That's going to lead to some decision. And right now, AI is about that one kind of recognition or that single prediction, but it doesn't handle that whole chain of events from actions to outcomes. And that's what DI does.
DI sounds that's just taking your example of, let's say, a processing facility for fruit and produce.
Sure.
Like, let's just say that you have an artificial intelligence and its job is to sort anything that's brown or kind of just not fit for sale or consumption. Are you saying that decision intelligence will eventually say, you're going to need X amount of extra employees to deal with all the rotten fruit, and it's going to, you're going to have to change your production line because it's going to do that? Like, it seems like such an
Right.
open-ended question.
Right. Well, it does seem open-ended, and so that's where the decisions come in. So what you do is you say, here's this fruit provider, and they're trying to decide whether to invest in some new equipment of
Hmm.
some sort. Or maybe let's take a different example. Maybe they're trying to decide whether to spray a fungicide that might prevent, some fruit blight.
Right.
Um, so they have a very specific decision they're facing today, and they're hoping that that reduces the fruit blight, and so they can have higher yield at the end of the season, right? And so that gives us a very narrow focus on what's the positive benefit of that machine, and then what's it going to cost to finance that machine, and maybe there's going to be some new regulations that if they overtreat with some product on their crops, they might get a fine from the EPA, and they need to take that into account. So it gets very focused because usually organizations aren't facing a dozen decisions at once. They're just facing a single decision or one or two in order to achieve their goals. And so instead of boiling the ocean, which is what old AI tended to do, we tended to build all the knowledge in the universe, 500,000 objects in our AI system, and turn the crank, and then out comes 42 and it gives us the answer to
Right.
everything, right? So this is much more focused and practical.
Yeah, it's and to that effect, like we said, let's say the glaucoma situation where you would feed a system full of pictures of validated, this is glaucoma, this is not glaucoma, be
Right.
able to decide it. What kind of data would then be needed to build the artificial intelligence that would have decision intelligence rolled in? And like, do you have to expand your data pool, or is it just simply just more rules that you give the machine?
Well, I'm really, really glad you asked that question, because one of the unexamined kind of cultural norms in AI is that we start with data, and that actually can create a lot of problems and unnecessary, I call it gratuitous data cleansing. In DI, you actually start at the other end. You start with the decision that you're facing and the outcome you hope that decision creates. And even if you don't have data, you can still draw a very simple picture of the decision. And in my book, I describe how to do this. I can explain it to you over coffee in 5 minutes, how to draw these pictures, because it's based on operant conditions. It's how people naturally think through things they're going to do. We make decisions every day, and we imagine what their outcomes will be. So the idea is it's very, very simple, and you can draw that picture, and then you know where the most valuable data is going to be. And if you don't have data, guess what? We can use human expertise. Duh, humans know things. And it's funny about AI. In the last AI summer in the 80s, when I was growing up, it was all focused on human expertise because data was expensive to process. And we kind of got overhyped. We were talking about sensationalism. We got overhyped on the human expertise and expert systems. And so we've done a pendulum swing. These days, the culture is if there's no data for it, it can't be AI, or we don't want to do it. And that's actually got us into some problems and some holes. So we need to actually start with a decision, and then that will tell us which data has the most value,
Hmm.
so we can focus our limited data cleansing, data gathering, sensor technology in the places where it actually leads, has a big impact on our decision.
Yeah,
So that we can do the DI without any data at all, and it'll have value actually.
that's very interesting, and you're right.
Yeah.
Going from experts to data. I mean that's about where we are now, where uh, data is king. Data, the amount of data that you can extract from humans. Think of all the captchas that people do every day, and people are simply sources of data points, and those data points
Right.
are then, the miracle drug that makes artificial intelligence even possible. But you're saying
Yep.
that humans still have a place in the workforce of tomorrow, and especially in tech.
Hugely. And we can sort of look at AI as in three phases. The big academic phase where most of us were college professors, as I was. The phase today, which is the data centric phase, which is where we start with the data and we say, okay, given that we have this big database, what's the machine learning we could build that might drive some value for us?
Hmm.
And then this next phase, the next era is going to be, okay, oh my gosh, there's all these situations, big decisions that have impacts on human lives and trillions of dollars. Whether we have data or not, we need to make those decisions better. So let's start with the decisions. And then it turns out that the understanding of how the world works, the causal structures, the system structures, the feedback loops in the world, AI hasn't gotten there yet. Humans know that, but AI doesn't. And so that's where the AI human partnership fits in. And humans build these DI models, and then those end up being a specification language, a requirements language for where AI fits in to solve the hardest decisions. And often you have multiple AI models within a decision model.
So, and my immediate reaction to this is that, talking about the best outcomes and the best decisions. I know that humans are inherently, they're biased. They're going to make
Yeah.
decisions that maybe they forgot something, and the decisions aren't great. So I
Yep.
can't expect AI or DI to be 100% perfect. But do you think that these machines are going to be better at decision making, or they're just going to, much like in the field of medicine, artificial intelligence is being used in conjunction with doctors to kind of
Yes.
say that these are areas of interest. We can discard the 95% of pictures, and our limited doctor resources can focus on the 5% that's already flagged. Is that yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. So that human computer partnership is the future. We call them human in the loop decision making. And when what DI does for us is it gives us a formal way of integrating the AI into the existing decision making. And you're absolutely right. It won't be perfect, but think of it like project planning. Project planning isn't perfect, but having a Gantt chart and being able to draw a picture of the dependencies, like I'm going to do this, and then when I'm finished, you're going to do this. Having a diagram really goes a long way, kind of like a blueprint. It gets us all on the same page about this thing that we're building. And we've never had a diagram technology for decisions, especially in complex environments. So simply, having this picture of how all the pieces fit together will move the needle to get better. So we're not saying, letting the perfect be the enemy of the better, but just having a structured way of thinking through complex decisions can really move the needle, and especially in big problems. Even a 5% change can save lives or save money or make a big difference. And for big complex problems like climate and poverty and conflict and things like that, you absolutely need that kind of multi-link thinking.
Yeah, that's those are problems that I know that we've had the best and the brightest of the Miss Americas working on world hunger, but we may need to change up our tactics just a little bit to actually get it done. And I will
I think
say
so.
though that we have a question, or we have a point here saying that in your book, you describe a new class of problems that AI is not able to solve. And I know that this may be repeating yourself just a little bit, but to that, we've talked about decision intelligence augmenting artificial intelligence, but DI doesn't exactly replace AI. It just makes it better. And what are some of those problems that that it would help solve?
Well, there's some big, gnarly, complex systems problems that are emerging right now: democracy, water, food, conflict, poverty, the status of women worldwide. And it's the belief of the people in the DI community that these are actually such interrelated problems that the reason we haven't addressed them is we think in terms of silos. We get this whack-a-mole problem where we will, solve the water issue somewhere, but we won't take into account communication or transport. And so it doesn't have the benefit that we want. This next class of really difficult human problems, in fact, the issues that are identified by the Millennium Foundation and the SDGs, are so interconnected that unless we have a rigorous science of understanding those interconnections and then using AI and data to give us kind of this seventh sense of humanity into, all these very complex movements of people and goods and dollars in a global economy, we won't be able to solve them. So we really do need new ways of thinking, new ways of visualizing, specifically getting out of kind of text and linear based thinking to visual and kinesthetic thinking in order to solve the next class of problems. And those are kind of societal, but even the challenges of a complex transnational, I work with some of the biggest consulting firms in the world, have levels of complexity that they're dealing with just in the commercial world that are really orders of magnitude more difficult. And they're starting to use DI as a way of bridging AI and evidence-based thinking into their very complex problems too.
So, what is it that in the future, what advancements in the future are going to make this better? Because, we have the data sets now. And not only do we have data sets, but we can actually process them. With decision intelligence, though, I'm having trouble thinking of course, on the show we've had everyone from IBM to Google to talk about their quantum computers. So maybe quantum computers are the answer. What new technology or what threshold are we trying to break to get this going? Or is it simply just, a matter of over time, we can do it now, we just have to do it better?
It's the latter. I don't see any technical barriers at this point. This technology is pretty proven. I would say the biggest challenge is actually a commercial one. People haven't heard of DI yet, not broadly. And so the companies like mine who are building and selling DI solutions, nobody's got a budget for it. So, I want to say thank you to you, Ben, to be on a show like this because this is a technology that's ready today. I mean, you can learn it in half an hour to draw a picture of a decision. And then if you take a few days, you can learn how to draw those pictures and use them as specifications for where the human expertise is needed and where the AI fits in so that they start to link together multiple technologies and link the technology stack to the human stack. We've really had a big gap actually between these two worlds, between the data people and people who make big decisions within companies and governments. And it really takes a very simple, a technology to bridge that gap. It's just diagrams, right?
Yeah.
And, we're building some interactive tools that can help you, but they don't require huge breakthroughs. It's actually pretty simple. It's just a matter of getting this well known and letting people understand that there is this new bridging tech between folks who are facing complex situations and the AI stack, which if we go back to the beginning of the call, whenever people hire AI people, they kind of bamboozle them with the math and the
Yeah.
optimization and the conjugate gradient, blah, 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 blah. It's like, it's like hiring a microwave engineer to be your chef, right? We don't need to know how the microwave works. That's credit to Kazi Kozyrkov at Google for that analogy. I just love it. Everybody's a microwave engineer, and the discipline and the field of being a chef, of taking these great technologies and combining them and putting them together to make a great dish that people will pay for, that solves, a need. That's what's been missing, and it's ready. It's ready to go.
Yeah, and really, I do enjoy having people such as yourself here on the program. I mean, just just a couple weeks ago, we had a guest who is really in the same position you are, but instead of decision intelligence for artificial intelligence, they were talking about spectrum splitting for Wi-Fi, and it was the solution for getting more bandwidth into the same amount of spectrum as you would, and so it solved this huge problem for the end user. It didn't really make any kind of difference, but all they had to do was really get the word out. Like it was not
Right.
cost prohibitive and things like that. Yeah.
Right. Low hanging fruit, right? Just really easy things. It's just a
Yeah.
matter of people learning about it. It's cool to be in a space like that, right? Where there really aren't any barriers. You can just go at light speed.
Yeah, it's and really just and being here on Compute America, being able to be an advocate for new technology like this is definitely what we love to do. So with
I'm
that being
grateful to
said,
it.
going back to the questions, we talked about a couple of these things. Maybe when it comes to jobs. We've talked about, still keeping humans in the loop. That's one aspect of artificial intelligence and decision intelligence. Do you think that, maybe just at the very simplest, you have all of these, you kind of mentioned microwave engineers versus chefs. Do you think that you're just going to have like another sous chef in the kitchen that's going to be handling this, or will this be a positive move for the workforce, or will this again take away jobs, much like artificial intelligence has been destined, or at least said it would do?
I think a lot of the folks that were previously at lower level jobs will find opportunities in this space. And the analogy to think about is, remember when we were all just coders and we didn't have software engineering? And the idea, oh, you're going to build a new project, let's hire a bunch of coders and have them start writing software. And we didn't have the discipline of figuring out, what business problem we're going to solve, QA to make sure that, it doesn't have any defects and it meets the needs of the customers and has high quality. Folks whose job was to project manage these things. That whole layer doesn't yet exist for AI. We just sit down and we hire the PhDs to build the models from the data. And what DI starts to do in the related field of applied agile AI, which my company also does, is it's creating all of these new disciplines, just like we used to have a requirements analyst or a business analyst whose job was to elicit what was needed and then help the technology guys to build the right tool. In this space, we have the decision modeler who says, what decision are you trying to support? And they sit down with all the stakeholders and they run a workshop to make sure that it's not just, a company, but it's the people who'll be impacted by that company's work. And, to really try to take into account the diverse and multifaceted impacts of the new technology so that you can model those. And, like you said, with a self-driving car, we'd sit down with a regulator and an ethicist and, have this diverse point of view in the loop. And then that's a tough job, is to pull together all of those different skill sets. And it requires what I'm calling a neo-generalist, somebody who recognizes that the big challenges right now are not building the next algorithm or getting great performance, or we don't need more microwaves. We've got 50 years of developing, all kinds of microwaves. What we need, and this is this new job, is the people who bridge from the technology into being useful for governments or commercial entities or nonprofits.
So, and you mentioned a term there, and that's actually one of the key points we were going to talk about, being a neo-generalist. And I will say that that's such an interesting area. I mean, just yesterday, let's see, I believe I was talking to, and this was yesterday's show, we were talking to Dr. Henry Manka, and he is with Posit Science Brain HQ. And essentially, his background was he was a PhD in computer science, and then he played a lot of video games, but then he was also in healthcare, and he sold healthcare devices. And then, last but not least, he was much like your role when it comes to kind of being an analyst and advising to a lot of boards. And it's that weird four-way skill set that he had that led him to Brain HQ, which was gamifying a healthcare system to develop a brain science to do XYZ. And it was like, it was like, how, like, you can take any 2 or 3 different disciplines, mix them, and I think that's when you
Yep.
get those really specialized things that we need.
Yeah, I think the history of Western civilization has been cutting things up into little pieces and getting very specialized. And we have sort of systematically ignored pulling things back together, resynthesizing, reintegrating. And as I have talked to decision makers at governments and companies worldwide, I have learned that that's where the innovation has to occur, is at that those interstitial spaces between disciplines. And so it's not just that there's exciting developments that can be built, it's that they're desperate to solve them because of this whack-a-mole problem. Again, we optimize in the marketing department and it hurts the engineering department, and we optimize financials and it hurts, HR, right? And we, just within a company, we're getting these like lack of understanding of what happens between silos. And then at a broader level, as we were talking about earlier, this lack of understanding of how all the pieces fit together into a complex system because we're reductionists. We break things down. And so the really exciting future is folks who know what it means, because you can't know the inside of the box of all of those fields. So you really need to learn how to ask good questions about the interface specifications of each of those disciplines. And then once, like a good software architect, right? You need to put these systems together in such a way that they solve a problem without getting lost in the details of the insides. You need to work modularly and use information hiding, but not from code, but from entire disciplines like behavioral psychology and economics. How do we put together an economic model with a behavioral psychology model and a regulatory model in order to get self-driving cars on the road in such a way that they solve real needs, as opposed to injuring people in ways that are frightening in the robot apocalypse.
Right.
Right.
And really, for those watching the video portion, we've been poking around your website, a lot of great information there, and we're definitely going to put a link to that just so people can learn about that. You have videos and such if people want to really drill down into it. But I've noticed that you have something here called RAID, which is Responsible AI DI Ecosystem, and you have entire conventions going on about this. You have a blog with a lot of great stories and information. You're really trying to get the word out there, and I'm almost saddened that it took until you could come on this program before I've heard about it. So there's a lot of evangelizing still to do.
Yes, there is. And I'm again very grateful to you and others for the opportunity to talk about this. And, the Rady Summit in particular happens once a year. The next one will be next September. And I encourage people to look that up. It's free, and all of the speakers are donating their time for free. It's a labor of love for everybody. We had Vince Cerf and some very senior government officials last year. And so we've managed to attract some of the real important movers and shakers in the world to that event. And we do it as just kind of a charity donation thing at Quantellia in combination with SAP. They put in some time and effort there. So check it out. Really important work. And it's about not just reducing the negative impacts of AI, which is what AI ethics is often about, but maximizing the positive benefits, right? Why isn't Silicon Valley solving the really hard problems like climate and poverty? We're some of the smartest people in the world, and we should be doing that. And so that's what that's all about.
It just it's just a little depressing to a point that companies are going to build and train these machines that, don't get me wrong, they will probably have solutions that are better than any singular voice out there when it comes to addressing, let's say, plastic waste. If you're a company like Coca-Cola or Pepsi, no one person out there is going to have the authority or the expertise to completely eliminate that from their production line, but they're going to build these systems before they act, or at least they're going to be advised by these systems to act. And I'm assuming that a lot of these issues that you mentioned, they do need acting on, correct? Like that, you believe that no one's going to train an AI with decision intelligence and it's going to spit back, do women really need advancement? Like, hopefully that's not going to be the outcome of all this.
Yeah, I think if that is the outcome, that'll be an interesting food for thought, right? So,
Yeah.
and we'll have to ask why.
For sure, for sure. And actually, since I have you here, and hopefully I'm not taking too much of your time, but I did want to get a little bit broader. Actually, before we move away from decision intelligence, is there any part of that we didn't cover?
No, you've asked great questions. I think we've touched on some of the most important aspects of that. Thank you, Ben.
No, our pleasure. And as always, this whole thing will be available after it's aired, and as a podcast, and people can listen to this at their leisure. But I also wanted to talk to you, just because we have had guests in the past, mainly from places like the Intel Corporation, who have come on the show and talked about, maybe getting organizations like the Girl Scouts of America, or getting, just kind of women interested in science. And, you seem very accomplished in the academic arena. I wanted to, kind of get your feeling on how that's been going, because a lot of companies have been, speaking of evangelizing, a lot of companies have been spending real money trying to go to middle school and elementary school even to encourage women to get into the STEM fields. How do you think that's been going, and how do you think the awareness has been over the past couple of years?
I think we're hitting a sea change. As I move around Silicon Valley, I am seeing a real backlash against the bro culture that you could argue has been exclusionary to women. So, for instance, I know I've mentioned SAP a couple times. I guess I really like them. They're one of my favorite clients. I
Mm-hmm.
just taught in the SAP Academy for Engineering, and they have their first cohort. It's a brand new thing. They had about 60 people, 50% women, and they did that intentionally because they recognized the value of that diversity. Um, so I'm starting to see some real understanding of the benefits of diversity, and I don't want to minimize at all the challenges that women still face. And I certainly feel it myself. I don't think I've been nearly as well mentored or networked
Mm-hmm.
as other men that I see that came up around the same time that I did. So it's not perfect, but it's funny you should ask this because I didn't know we were going to talk about this at all. But so it's just kind of a coincidence. I've just had like 6 or 7 people in the last month or so say, Lorien, you need to really focus on the women thing. And maybe if you should do a startup that's focused on selling to women. And, it's funny. The other thing I've been wondering about is as we talk about these new jobs in DI that require neo-generalists and lateral thinking. I'm not a neurobiologist, but I know there's some thinking that women, can keep like multitask like 12 different things in their heads. And maybe we're genetically great at doing these complex systems models. So maybe that's an opportunity for women to sort of re-enter and dominate. Maybe they can be in DI. The two big DI evangelists right now are two women, me and Cassie Kozrikoff at Google. So maybe that's a cool new opportunity for women to get interested in.
Yeah, it's really it's just something that we've had on our radar, which is getting more women in tech. And
Yeah.
I it just kind of came to me, not simply just because you're a woman, but because we've been doing three shows a day now for a little while. And I will say that when it comes to higher level tech positions, it still definitely skews male. I mean, there are a lot more minorities, and we just had a gentleman who is CEO of his company who immigrated from Jordan. That was an interesting conversation. But I always like to kind of touch on maybe unique aspects of our guests. Sometimes they're serial entrepreneurs. They can't stick with just one idea. They have to go off and start a brand new thing. So
Yeah.
I definitely like that broad view of our guests. So thank you for humoring me.
No worries. I like that you asked. I think it's important.
Absolutely. So with that being said, everyone, Quantellia, we're going to have a link in the show notes, Quantellia. You also have a blog there where you touch on a lot of this and, go into individual aspects of what we talked about just briefly. And with that being said, I'm going to ask you, Dr. Pratt, where's the best place to go for information?
Well, you can go to linkthebook.com. which is my new book, which is the first book that's ever been written about decision intelligence. It's brand new, and so I would encourage you to take a look at that. Makes a great last-minute Christmas present, very accessible. Anybody who's interested in the impact of technology in society, as well as anybody in AI who's looking to be ahead of the curve and know what's coming up, take a look at that. And then my personal blog is lorienpratt.com. But that's linked to from Quantellia, so you already spelled that out. So yes,
Absolutely, yeah. And actually, speaking of link, I actually have that on my bookshelf. So yeah, definitely would recommend that. Yeah, very
Thank you.
cool. My pleasure, my pleasure. And really, this entire conversation has been a pleasure. And I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with us.
Thank you, Ben. Happy holidays to you and your guests.
Absolutely. And thank you so much. And once again, if you have anything that you'd like to come back on the show, maybe in the next couple of months or so, hey, open invitation.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Ben. It's been a great interview.
All right. So everyone, and once again, computeramerica.com, we'll have a link in the show notes. Until next time, Dr. Pratt, thank you so much, and have a great holiday.
Thank you. You too.
All right. And everyone, there we go. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show with computer and technology news. But if you'd like to check that out, we will, of course, have links in the show notes, computeramerica.com. Now, with, I think we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. Not much time left. Very interesting conversation. Love to hear it. And here we go. Computer technology news. Everyone, let's go ahead and get started. So talking about today's news, and let's see, there's so much we could talk about. And I should probably mention CES 2020, Computer America will be out there, and we'll be interviewing guests, getting names, and don't worry, we'll have brief excerpts of what's going on out there and what's being demonstrated out there, because some of the stuff out at CES you won't be able to see anywhere else. But at the same time, the best of the best will be coming back here on Computer America to talk about what they debuted and what they showed. So let's go ahead and start off with that just a little bit. And hey, how about we go ahead and talk about because we talked about CES, we can talk about Hyundai. They said that Hyundai will show off a flying car concept at CES, saying that the vehicle is one part of the company's vision for future cities. And trust me, if you think that's a little bit ahead of its time, no, these companies really truly believe that flying cars, much like you have Ubers and Lyfts right now, well, you will have lifting Ubers. Yeah, I went there. Lifting Ubers that will ferry you from one place to another through really overcrowded city streets. So they said that it wouldn't be CES without companies showing off their wildly ambitious tech, and Hyundai plans to accommodate. On January 6th, the South Korean automaker will introduce its first personal air vehicle, as well as two other concepts, an autonomous land vehicle and a hub where passengers can transfer between the two modes of transportation. They said that obviously they did not provide a lot of information about its flying vehicle. The one detail we have is that all three concepts will work in tandem with one another to move people through congested cities, which is something that Uber has already tried to talk about. Really, it's the idea of like the important CEO moving from building to building, going to rooftop helipads and taking helicopters to important meetings. Well, what if you could bring that cost down using electricity and batteries and electric flying vehicles? What if you could bring that cost down to maybe, instead of, I don't know how much a CEO would pay for a helicopter, but what if it was more like $40 or $50 to get downtown almost instantaneously? Maybe 4 minutes instead of an hour congested drive. That's the dream of the future, and hey, we might just see it. So let's go ahead and continue on here, looking at some of the other stories. How about we discuss? No, I don't want to talk about Apple. You know what? Fine. We'll talk about Apple. Why not? Apple is reportedly working on get this. You think, these tech companies, they have so much on their plate. Maybe Apple is finally going to get its act together and give us the smart TV we all know Apple was planning on giving us. No. So before you even get a smart TV, before you even get the self-driving car Apple was reportedly working on, before you get the Apple microwave or any other device that you could think of, no, instead, Apple is reportedly working on using satellites to send data to its devices, saying that the secret team working on the project hopes to have something ready within 5 years. Probably much like the smart TV and the self-driving car. They have these people on the payroll. They'll have like a small core of engineers working on it, but it is by no means a new product. It is by no means a new division for Apple. And it's just nothing that Apple will concretely say, we are definitely going to do XYZ. It just doesn't happen. So with that being said, Apple has a secret team working on a new satellite and wireless data technologies. The group consists of about a dozen software and hardware engineers who specialize in aerospace, satellite, and antenna design. Man, they could use those for the iPhone 4, the iPhone 4S. Yeah, the antenna design. And as well as a number of executives from those same fields. In particular, the team is led by 2 former Google executives who worked at a satellite observation startup called Skybox. There you go. So the apparent goal of the project is to find a way to stream data directly to Apple devices. If successful, the team would allow Apple to lower its dependence on carriers. And really, this is like almost the scary part of tech going forward. Is this idea that, just the other day we talked about Facebook building its own operating system so that it would not have to rely on either, Apple with its iOS system or Google with its Android system. Facebook felt threatened about being pushed out of these services, that they felt the need to build their own operating system for whatever reason. And now we're looking at Apple feeling threatened by its other verticals Apple feels threatened enough that they need to look into the idea of building their own satellites, data, and of course this would be your 5G, your 5G, 4G and your cell signal. It's almost scary how powerful these tech companies are. And let's take another one. Let's just say Amazon, and they are a tech company. Don't get me wrong. They built, they have half the internet running on their servers. They felt threatened by UPS and FedEx, and just recently they cut off all services with FedEx, and they decided to deliver most of their own packages. That seems to be the way that these companies are operating. When you have billions of dollars and really a market capitalization of about $1 trillion, you can start to push out not even direct competitors, but people who used to be your vendors. Now you just straight up replace them. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing. In fact, heck, probably a monopoly, but what do I know? They said that the initiative could be abandoned, according to Gurman. Moreover, a clear direction and use for the satellites has not been finalized. Like we said, Apple does this sometimes with some of its other projects, and this is probably just exploratory. They said that the project definitely fits a pattern of Apple trying to lower its dependence on other companies when it comes to the success of the iPhone. After settling a lengthy legal spat with Qualcomm, Apple spent $1 billion to acquire the majority of Intel's smartphone modem business so that it could engineer a future where it doesn't even need to deal with Qualcomm altogether. That's just being able to leverage leverage your position in the market to not need others in the market is, So let's go ahead and continue here. What else can we talk about? Let's go to, I like this publication. So this And I'm sorry, I thought that last story would take me all the way through the end of the show, but it didn't. Who knew my rage for Apple would be so brief? Let's go ahead and talk about. Okay, Snopes. I actually have a lot of respect for Snopes, and actually, I'm quickly running out of time here. I've probably less than 2 minutes, but Snopes, I have a huge respect for what Snopes does. They are fact checkers. If you ever want to know anything that's either old or new and whether or not it's true, Snopes is like your go-to for that. They have very qualified fact checkers, and they had to step away from Facebook when they said that we couldn't even handle that. So at least they are, they're not just about the money. They truly are about shedding light onto half truths or false statements. So in 2020, they said that they're working on a crowdfunding effort that it hopes will free it from a dependence on internet platforms for which the truth is a secondary consideration. There you go. They said that the last we heard about the company, it was emerging from a disastrous, a really ineffectual play with Facebook. The obvious mismatch on priorities made Snopes think hard about its future and how to guarantee it could pursue its mission without begging for coins from companies that so obviously cared so little about truth. And the last couple of years have made it clear that the road leads nowhere near the sites that actually deliver news to users, Google, Facebook, Apple, and so on. No one really has a place for Snopes, even though Snopes delivers exactly what we want, which is truth. Truth is important. So they're saying that 2020 is going to be bonkers in terms of debunking the information, but the business model isn't going to get better. There will be increase in traffic and it'll be bigger in traditional metrics, but I think there will be an appetite for a venue online that you can consume information without vitriol or spin. So with that being said, they're saying having readers chip in $5 towards a follow-up or expenses related to investigation like this could be a great way to create small but noticeable change. This could also submit relevant information and tips. Saying that we don't have 2 billion users, we may not have some unicorn company, but we can be something, he said. So Snopes, really best of luck up there. I really do wish you the best, and you do a very great service. Best of luck. So everyone, that's it for the show here today. Thank you so much for tuning into the Computer America Show. Until next time, have a great one. Thank you so much. ComputerAmerica.com. Bye, everyone.